Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome in to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Monday, February 8th. That's right, the day after the Super Bowl. I'm recording this here on Sunday. Greater Philadelphia, we're going through another snowstorm. Looking out my window, 3 to 5 more inches of snow here today. All across the Northeast, getting hammered here once again. But the big game's coming up a little bit later. I'm recording this during the afternoon here, so if you guys are getting ready for your Super Bowl party, hopefully you got everything squared away, did all your grocery shopping. I think it's going to be a great game. So just touching on that ever so briefly here. I know this is the baseball pod, but of course the Super Bowl is the Super Bowl. So I like the Kansas City Chiefs -3 and the under in regards to today's action. A couple of prop bets we got going here. Anytime touchdown scorers going LeGarrette Blount, Chris Godwin. On Kansas City's side, I got Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, putting together a bit of a parlay action there. So if you're in a state that allows sports gambling, I know those are expanding by the year here. I believe Virginia and Michigan just got approved to use the FanDuel apps, DraftKings, all that good stuff. So hopefully you guys are enjoying yourself, being responsible. Try to stay social distanced at these parties. I know you guys are sick of hearing all that stuff, but be safe, enjoy yourself. And I myself, an Eagles fan, I'm watching the game for the commercials. I mean, I'll be using the restrooms during the game and not during the commercials because I like to see what's going on, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But here we are talking the baseball podcast. We had the last big fish to sign in the past couple of days, and I'm talking about Trevor Bauer, of course, who did a mini decision a la LeBron James out there. Released his decision on YouTube, and it came out that he was down to the Mets and the Dodgers as the last two before ultimately picking the Los Angeles Dodgers. And his contract came out, and oh my goodness, was this the contract he was hoping for. It's a total of 3 years, $102 million. Year one, here in 2021, he's going to be making $40 million. Next year, 2022, coming up at $45 million, which leaves about $17 million left in year three. And some details around his decision in the contract. He does have an opt-out clause after each year. After year one, year two, he can opt out of this deal. So I anticipate a 2-year, $85 million commitment from the Los Angeles Dodgers before he opts out before year three. He'll still only be in his early 30s, so I think the market for him, if he performs, the Dodgers continue to excel, will be that above $17 million. So once again, you read 3 years, 102, but ultimately I think this is going to be 2 years and $85 million. So how did this compare from his offer with the New York Mets? It seems that they were right around the same market, 3 years, $105 million. However, that breakdown, I believe, was $30, $35, and $40 million. I think it was a little bit more backloaded with opt-outs after year one and year two, which then brings the guarantee through 2 years in favor of the Los Angeles Dodgers, which ultimately I do feel was the reason he decided to pick L.A. Now, beyond the money, there were, of course, some other mitigating factors. We've talked about here in the past couple of episodes what's going on with the New York Mets in regards to the scandals that have recently been released. A new general manager, former manager Mickey Callaway, a lot of turmoil happening in New York City. So I think Bauer kind of looked at that and really didn't want to be associated with that aspect of things because his social media presence, his persona on social media. He's gotten into a few spats with some fans. So I don't think he wanted to tie his name into any sort of controversial subject or organization at this time. And then, of course, there's location. I mean, we all know Bauer, a West Coast kid, went to UCLA. It's why I thought the Angels could have potentially been a dark horse in these sweepstakes. But as you continue to learn and do research, his relationship with said Mickey Callaway was not great from his time in Cleveland, and they didn't see eye to eye. So the more you heard about that, the more it seemed like that was not an option for him. But the Dodgers going all out here, kind of a fascinating signing when it comes to LA's perspective. But back to Bauer and his $40 million that he's going to get here in 2021. I'm sure you guys have read the reports by now, but he is scheduled to make more money this year than 3 major league teams combined. The Pirates' payroll right now is scheduled to be around $30 million. The Baltimore Orioles are right under $35 million for 2021 in commitments. And then you have the Cleveland Indians at $36.5 million. So one player for the Dodgers, Trevor Bauer, is going to be paid more than 3 organizations in their entire 26-man payroll. And this gets into a bigger conversation that I'm not going to have right now just due to the interest of time and a lot of different discussions to have here. But the salary cap in baseball, as well as a potential salary floor, I think could benefit the parity across Major League Baseball, because when you have big market teams such as the Mets, the Dodgers, Phillies, Yankees, who else you want to name within that market, having individuals making more money than entire organizations, I mean, how can Pittsburgh and Baltimore compete and potentially sign top-end talent with the likes of the Dodgers just coming in and blowing away the luxury tax with the addition of Trevor Bauer here? So just a fascinating, more detailed conversation I'm sure we'll have as the collective bargaining agreement continues to fluctuate and evolve here. We did have a reconciliation for 2021, which we spoke of, the players turning down the latest update or agreement for this season. But after this season, when they have to discuss a new CBA, I think that is going to be a very important conversation around what the players and owners are going to have to decide on. But Trevor Bauer being a free agent, I saw that he was the first Cy Young winner to then hit free agency since all the way back almost, 30 years ago. Good math there. 1992. Greg Maddux was the last gentleman to win the Cy Young and then hit free agency. So Trevor Bauer, certainly he's striked when the iron is hot, as regards to that saying goes, because diving into some of his statistics, which we're going to do here in a minute, I'm not so sure that Trevor Bauer is worth this type of money. I mean, over the course of 162 games, you're looking at about 35 starts, and my man making $40 million is going to get over $1 million a start when it comes to this summer. And do his statistics line up with that? Does his past performance line up with that? Well, let's dive in here a little bit, because over his 9-year career, he is 75-64 with a 3.90 ERA. So career standing-wise, he's certainly not worth being the top paid pitcher in all of baseball, with the likes of Garrett Cole, Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, all the top-end guys that you can think of off the top of your head. Their career stats in at least the last 5 years certainly align with being paid more than Trevor Bauer. But this is where, again, in regards to his 2020, the Dodgers are certainly gambling that he is going to continue with this form. But he only had 11 starts in 2020. So, of course, about a third of the season. Could he have just had a hot stretch? Was he going to kind of plateau or flatten out if he would have gotten to 35? As well as being in the NL Central last year, about half of these starts came against some of the worst teams in baseball. I mean, this division was not loaded last year. You had the Cubs, who had started a rebuild, ultimately winning the division. Cincinnati, with Bauer, made the playoffs, but below them was the Cardinals, who snuck in right around 500. The Brewers were under 500, and of course the Pirates were down in the basement in that division. And then you go to the AL Central. That was the other competition there, so very good division on that side of things. But half of the 11 starts came against teams that were not at the upper echelon of competition when it comes to 2020. So let's look at his career and kind of how that staggers. And he's only had one other season with an ERA below 4.18 throughout the course of the season. And even 2019 combined, he was at 4.48. So that season in which he really excelled was 2018. So yes, 2 out of the last 3 years, he's been very good. And you have to bet on recent performance kind of continuing into the future. But again, before 2018, his ERA was in the low fours, 4.18, 4.19, 4.26, 4.55, 5.29. So you have to think that his interaction with the Driveline organization, his affiliation with spin rate and everything along those lines is where the Dodgers are putting their money, and the fact that he can continue and prove that he is worth this type of money. Because you think to yourself, okay, $40 million, you know the Dodgers are excellent. Maybe it's his postseason performance that they are betting on. But diving into those statistics, he hasn't been spectacular there either. I mean, 2016, he made the World Series with the Cleveland Indians in that postseason. During the ALDS, he had one start with a 5.79 ERA. He then he only threw 2/3 of an inning in the ALCS. Then in the World Series, 3 games, 2 starts, a 5.40 ERA. He made it back in 2017 over the course of 2 starts. Didn't allow an earned run over 8 innings, but gave up 4 runs total. And then in 2018, in the ALDS, he appeared in 3 games with no starts and had a 6.75 ERA for the postseason. So it's not like you're getting a Curt Schilling type of effort in the postseason from Bauer. He's been pretty steadily just above mediocre when it comes to his stats across the board. So you have to look at 2020. The Dodgers have to like what they've seen from his updates, his sabermetrics, to pull the trigger here and make him the highest paid pitcher in all of baseball. It's just one of those where I think this one's going to be determined on whether or not he's going to be worth the value in regards to what they're paying him. Because is he even the ace of this staff? I mean, right now, the Dodgers, they're the only rotation in baseball with 3 former Cy Young winners. They have David Price still in the rotation, which everybody forgets about, including myself, because he opted out of the 2020 season for health and safety reasons. You then, of course, have the great Clayton Kershaw still in the rotation, and you add Trevor Bauer. So is this guy going to be the number 3 in the rotation? I think you put him at number 2, split up the lefties of Price and Kershaw, but then you got the highest paid pitcher in baseball coming into that number 2 slot. It's certainly going to be fascinating to see what happens there moving forward. So the Dodgers, of course, though, they've kind of tried to sign this particular type of contract the past couple of off seasons. Last year with Garrett Cole, they tried to entice him into a shorter-term, much higher money deal. He, of course, went for the length with the Yankees of 9 years. The year before that, it was Manny Machado, Bryce Harper, who both decided stability was very important. So for the first time here, they're able to get one of these big fish to bite on a short-term, higher average annual value deal and get the guy that they're looking for. So do I think earlier moves from this offseason also dictated the aggressiveness of the Dodgers? I certainly think what San Diego has done put a bit more pressure on them, because clearly now these are the 2 best teams in the National League. And if you really want to argue nitty-gritty, 2 of the best 3 is what I'll give you there. Maybe mix in the Braves. But I certainly think the 2 top teams in this conference are in this division. And I think both of these teams are going to win 100 games. And with no expanded postseason, winning this division is going to be of utmost importance because you get into that wild card game, and certainly anything can happen on one day and, any given Sunday, so to speak here. But has there ever been a 100-win team to not win their division in baseball? And the answer is yes, but it hasn't happened very often, and even since 1962, it's only happened 4 times. Most recently in 2018, the Yankees finished 162, but they were 8 games behind the World Series champion Red Sox that year. In 2001, you had the Oakland A's go 102-60, which was still 14 games behind the Seattle Mariners, and of course their insane 116-win season that year. You had the 1993 Giants finish 103-59. They were a game behind the Braves. And then in 1980, the Orioles, with that rotation, finished 162 and 3 games behind the Yankees in the American League East. So I anticipate both of these teams winning 100-plus games. The Padres, of course, adding everybody to that rotation. Blake Snell, Dinelson Lamet, let's see here, Yu Darvish, of course, and then they added Joe Musgrove for depth. So the the Dodgers on the flip side, they, of course, add Trevor Bauer to Price, Kershaw, Walker Buehler, sprinkle in Urias. You got May potentially as well being involved. So this division out there and those top 2 specifically absolutely loaded. And everybody else in the NL West is certainly not happy with this offseason and the way things have progressed. But myself being a Phillies fan, I am much happier having Bauer out west than with the New York Mets. I mean, that rotation would have been scary. And again, it wasn't, that they came up short with their offer. I think it was just a multitude of factors that ultimately led Bauer to sign out west there with the Dodgers. So fascinating offseason continues here once again. Bauer to the Dodgers at 3 years, $102 million. I myself anticipate $285 being the cutoff, and then Bauer heading back to the open market after that. But man, oh man, so we've seen it now. George Springer spurns the Mets, goes to Toronto. JT Realmuto back to the Phillies after the Mets signed McCann. And then Trevor Bauer spurns New York to head out to L.A. to the Dodgers. So are the Mets going to kind of put their attention elsewhere? Where are they going to head from here? Maybe it's the secondary pitching market. So we'll get into all that here in the next segment as we'll talk to you guys about the signings that have taken place recently, as there have been a flurry of moves over the last couple of days. I may have even missed one. I like to keep notes as I hear about them, but I may have missed one or two because things have gotten hot and heavy here over the past couple of days. But let's step aside here now. This will wrap up the first segment. We'll step aside for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back, I'll get you guys up to date on the rest of the signings that have taken place. There's been a couple of trades as well out there. So a lot to talk about on today's episode. I appreciate you guys listening in. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be back right after this.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. If you're listening to this Monday, February 8th, and you're from Kansas City or Tampa Bay, Florida, man, you're either having a heck of a night or certainly dealing with a bout of depression right about now. So I myself here in Philadelphia, this just brings back memories of 3 years ago with Nick Foles defeating the New England Patriots and all the fun that ensued down Broad Street the night of the Super Bowl and then the parade the following Tuesday. Just a fantastic 72 hours and memories I will never forget in regards to the Eagles finally bringing home a Super Bowl. But before we dive into segment number 2, I'll take this time to please ask you guys to rate and review the podcast. Leave 5 stars, hit subscribe wherever you're listening. Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, as well as YouTube. And we did get a comment on YouTube from a gentleman where his tag is Just Joe, Joe. What's going on, Joe? Appreciate the comment. Joe said, I have no idea why these get no views on YouTube. Kevin, great episode again. I usually listen on Google Podcasts. Can't seem to leave comments there. Anyway, always great content and spot-on commentary. Definitely keep it up. I've listened to most podcasts on baseball, and yours is one that I never miss. And thank you for the kind words, Joe. I appreciate you listening out there every episode. It means a lot to us here at GSMC, and I myself certainly appreciate the kind words. So hopefully we can continue to keep it up for you, keep you entertained as we transition here into the 2021 season. So if you guys want to leave a comment, rate and review the pod, I'll read them here on the show. I always mention I like to keep this a community effort out there, not a one-way street where I'm just yelling at you guys with my opinions here for an hour a couple of times a week. So I certainly want to keep you involved. And if you guys have any takes, questions, whatever it is, let me know and we'll have ourselves a bit of a conversation here. But like I mentioned at the end of the first segment, there were certainly a flurry of moves that took place here over the weekend. Everybody was enthralled with the Trevor Bauers sweepstakes. We had Bob Nightingale saying he's going to the Mets. We had others saying that's not true. And, of course, we found out that he ultimately picked the Dodgers. So I don't know how close he was to the Mets, but Mr. Nightingale, he takes a lot of swings. You know, every now and then he's going to miss one. But the Dodgers signed Bauer. But there were, I have it written down here. I try not to miss signings. I like to, write them down as I see them. But there were like 10 or 12 other signings that took place here. So let's try to get them all to you here in segment number 2 as we move forward. So the New York Mets, they transitioned their efforts not long after missing out on Trevor Bauer. They signed center fielder Albert Almora from the Chicago Cubs. Did not get a term yet on the deal as it was announced here on Sunday, but I definitely think it'll be short term. Almora is more of a defensive specialist, former number 1 draft pick of the Chicago Cubs. It looks like they are putting him as a right-handed hitter to alternate with Brandon Nimmo out in center field or potentially used as a defensive specialist. There were rumors of Jackie Bradley Jr. being on the Mets' radar, but I think they went for a cheaper, more defensive options in Almora, again, to kind of platoon with Nimmo out in center and have that late inning specialist defensively with that rotation, that bullpen. They anticipate having themselves a lead quite often, and they're going to need a lockdown center fielder. So they sign Almora after transitioning from Bauer. They're still rumored to be in on starting pitchers, which we'll talk about next segment as I keep you guys up to date with the rest of the happenings going on out there. But continuing down the list of signings here, we had right-handed pitcher Mike Fiers. He signed with the A's for a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Of course, everybody knows Fiers as the whistleblower for the Astros scandal. That's something I don't think is ever going to leave his reputation, as, again, we're almost 4 years out now, and I'm still mentioning it here on the podcast. But Fiers finds himself a job for $3.5 million with the A's, and I like that for Oakland. I previewed the AL West here, talking about how they need some additions and some guys to bounce back. Well, bringing back Fiers into that rotation, I think, is a step in the right direction for Oakland to compete here in the AL West. Next up, we have second baseman Colton Wong. He signed with the Milwaukee Brewers. Colton Wong's market started to heat up after the run on shortstop happened about a week ago or so. People transitioned to kind of up the middle. The Cardinals could have bring him back. The Phillies were having conversations, but ultimately he signed with the Brewers for 2 years, $18 million. There is a club option for year number 3. So if he performs there in Milwaukee, he'll parlay that into an extra third year, but guaranteed 2 and 18 for Mr. Wong out there in Milwaukee. I think that's a nice signing for the Brewers, as they saw Arenado being added to the Cardinals. They then transitioned, saying, okay, if the Cardinals are now the team to beat, we're going to have to add some offense here and try to keep up. And Colton Wong, a very solid second baseman in St. Louis for the past number of years, will be a great addition to that Milwaukee clubhouse. Next on the list, right-hander Mike Foltynewicz. He's, of course, coming off an injury-plagued season. he signed with the Texas Rangers for 1 year and $2 million. Now, the Rangers very much in a rebuild. I predicted them to be in the basement of the AL West, so Foltynewicz certainly seeing that and kind of betting on himself here. Betting that he can show over the course of 2021. He is back healthy. He's going to be able to perform, and he can parlay that into a better deal because just a few years back with Atlanta, he was recognized as kind of an up-and-coming star. You know, a hard-throwing righty, excellent stuff. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And Atlanta has since filled his spot in the rotation with a few other free agents. So he found himself on the market. He finds a home with the Rangers. And heck, even if he performs with the first half of the year, maybe he'll be on the trade market come July and be able to transition that success into playing for a contender on the back half of the season. Next up, we have Jock Peterson. He is no longer with the LA Dodgers. He has found a home with the Chicago Cubs. So the Cubs essentially let Kyle Schwarber walk, where he goes to the Washington Nationals and sign almost an exact replacement. It really is fascinating if you look at his statistics compared to Schwarber. They're almost identical for the past couple of seasons. Hitting right around that 230 mark, more power than on base percentage, okay defensively, both outfielders. Peterson, he could play left field for the Cubbies, so he signs for $4.5 million as opposed to Schwarber, who signed for $10 million with the Nationals, but he's guaranteed $7 million in this deal because there is a mutual option for $10 million for year 2 with the Cubs. But if the Cubbies decide to decline that option and buy out his contract, there will be a $2.5 million buyout that comes with it. So, yes, he'll be paid $4.5 this year, but if they buy him out, another $2.5 is coming into his pocket. So he's guaranteed $7 million for at least 1 year of action, and if everything goes well, it'll be 2 years and $14.5 million. So basically $7 million a year. Either way you're looking at it, and I think Peterson in Chicago, a hitter-friendly park, I do think he'll have a solid year there with Chicago, and I like the move for the Cubs. You know, again, you let Schwarber walk, you sign his replacement for $3 million less, and you're about to get the same sort of production there. So a solid money-saving move there by the Cubbies. Next up, second baseman Jonathan Schoop. It is said that he is going to sign with the Tigers for 1 year, $4.5 million. The Tigers continue to sprinkle in professional hitters. We've talked about it in the past. Robbie Grossman, a few others, going to work with A.J. Hinch there in Detroit. Now, I still have them in the basement of the AL Central. I don't think this moves them along or, raises their standing within the division. But, again, professional athletes, professional hitters, a lot of young talent there in Detroit that could be ready for minor league action by the second half of the season, depending on or the major league action by the second half, depending on how the minors go. So I think Schoop could bring along a few of those kids, show them the ropes, show them how to perform, and it could be a nice summer for him there in Detroit. Next up, we have Trevor Williams, pitcher, signing with the Cubs. 1 year, $2.5 million. So this gets back to the Schwarber, letting him walk, not paying him $10. Then you basically take that $10 million, give it to Peterson and Williams, and you basically get a 2-for-1 for the same amount of money there. So the Cubbies, I don't want to completely write them off yet. If Chris Bryant bounces back, Baez, if they don't move Contreras, you got Rizzo. Now you add Peterson, you got Williams. Yes, they moved Darvish for, pennies on the dime there, but I do think Chicago isn't going to completely fall off, and if a few things break their way, they could find themselves certainly in competition for the NL Central. The next big signing, however, that took place over the weekend was Marcell Ozuna. He is going to return to the Atlanta Braves. He signed a 4-year, $65 million deal with a club option for a 5th year, which would bring it at another $15 million. So the potential there is for $580 for Ozuna. And what does this deal say to me? It tells me that the Braves are very confident that the DH is going to return to the National League starting during the 2022 season, because Ozuna playing the outfield for the next 4 years, I don't think it's a good investment. And, dating back to this past year where he was the designated hitter and absolutely raked. He was one of the best hitters in the National League this past year. So they do anticipate those skills continuing to progress and not fall off. as he advances there in age. So I think this is the Braves telling their fans, hey, this year may be a bit spotty, outfield every day, could have some hiccups, but starting next year, we're going to have $3 and about $50 million of one of the best DHs in all of baseball, and certainly in the National League. So as a Phillies fan, I was upset to see him return because, again, he hit a ton of big at-bats, a ton of big hits, ton of big performances against the NL East. So Ozuna returns to the Braves for a nice little deal. Now, moving forward, does this complicate things with their salary cap and potentially Freddie Freeman, who will become a free agent after next year? There's already rumors that the Braves may not have the money to compete with his market, and he could be one of the next big names to move. I mean, the MVP winner of last year, I think he's going to have another fantastic year once again. Could he be on the move? We'll get there. But that, again, in the back of your mind, thinking to yourself, okay, maybe Ozuna can play first base for some of those years during that contract if Freeman does in fact move on. So, not saying he's going to, but I'm saying there are a few signs there where Atlanta may not be able to afford Freeman amongst some of these other deals that they currently have signed. Lastly here, a few relief pitchers. Let's see, Alex Colomé signed with the Minnesota Twins. He was potentially the top remaining free agent arm. Had a lot of interest from the Phillies, other teams out there, as pretty much we talked about starting the previews. Everybody's looking for relief pitching help still. So he signs with Minnesota, 1 year, $6.25 million. I do like that deal for the Twins. The Twins had lost Trevor May to the Mets earlier in the offseason, so they needed to establish and add to that bullpen once again. And yes, Colome's underlying metrics may not be where they were a few years back. We've talked about a dip in velocity, a bit more hard-hit contact, but again, those high-level stats that everybody likes, ERA, opponent's batting average, they were still very good in regards to his success last year. So quite a few saves could be used at the back end of the bullpen, but I like this deal for Minnesota. He comes over from the White Sox. The White Sox are going to be the main competition. He should know a lot about these hitters, having faced them in spring training, being around them day in and day out. Potentially he'll have some inside information on which hitters struggle with what, and ultimately how to get Jose Abreu out, how to deal with Roberts, Moncada, Anderson, all of these guys. He should have a good understanding on how to attack these hitters if he ends up facing them late in games here during the 2021 season. The last relief pitcher was Joakim Soria. He signed with the Diamondbacks. His term was not yet available out there, but I anticipate a 1-year deal for Soria with Arizona. Once again, Arizona looking up at San Diego and L.A. going, man, we got a tough road ahead of us. But Soria trying to continue his career, bounce back. I like that deal for Soria. He stays employed. He gets another year. And ultimately, if he has a good year, finds himself back on the market for 2022. Wrapping up segment number 2, there were a couple of trades that took place here. The first one involving the Angels and Cardinals. Dexter Fowler, outfielder for the Cardinals, is going to L.A. He is also getting money sent with him. The Cardinals are sending some cash to L.A. to cover Fowler's deal. The Cardinals are getting back a player to be named later. So this was pretty much a bit of a salary dump, a bit of a roster crunch, opening up a 40-man roster spot for potentially making an addition elsewhere within the organization. But Fowler goes out to L.A. Maybe he brings some stability to that outfield alongside Trout. You have Upton out in the right field. We talked about how Adele could potentially take that next step as one of the former top prospects in all of baseball, but struggled with his initial introduction to Major League pitching. So Fowler could be a nice fourth outfielder, a nice kind of rotational piece out there. So the Angels make a move and add Dexter. And then lastly, we had a trade between the Oakland Athletics and Texas Rangers, which kind of fascinating being in the same division, but a couple of big names that were involved is Elvis Andrus going from Texas out there to Oakland. So Oakland trying to replace Marcus Semien, who they lost via free agency with Elvis Andrus, but they sent back designated hitter Chris Davis, who again struggled in 2020, but was fantastic years prior, 40-plus home runs, multiple seasons. He goes in there to Texas, Combine him in the middle of that lineup with Joey Gallo. You certainly get some swing and miss through the heart of that order, but you also get some pop. One from the right side, one from the left side. So Texas adding a little bit of thump to the offense. You had a couple of catchers transition there. Oakland added Aramis Garcia, and Texas added Jonah Heim. Those guys, both catchers, flipping organizations. Neither really ready to contribute at the major league level, but still going back and forth. And then lastly, Texas also received Dane Aker, or Acker, depending on how you pronounce that there, a pitching prospect heading that way. But the big two names were certainly Andrews going to Oakland and Davis going to Texas. So Oakland continues to kind of manipulate the roster, start that transition into the next phase. They find themselves a shortstop. Texas gets back a bat here with some pop in it, middle of the lineup, a bit better for them, and just kind of fascinating to see interdivisional rivals, transition some big names there back and forth. So a lot going on across Major League Baseball as the top guys have now signed. Teams know they now know how much money they have to sign the second tier or third tier of free agents, and I anticipate here over the next couple of days that we're going to see a run on starting pitching continue to filter out and find employment before pitchers and catchers report here in just about 10 days and even less, depending on where you're headed. So that'll do it for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. When we come back, we'll talk about rumors, news, notes, get you guys up to date on everything else going on across baseball. So stick around, everybody. We'll be right back. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys listening.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Appreciate you guys listening in today. If you haven't checked us out on social media, do yourself a favor, do myself a favor. Please do that. Head to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the social media platforms. Check out both GSMC Baseball, where we'll keep you guys up to date on everything going on, give our thoughts, reactions to what's taking place out there, as well as the Podcast Network, which will keep you guys up to date across the board, because the network itself has shows, 20 to 30 different types of shows, from health and fitness to politics to news to books, movies, television, football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is. There's a podcast out there for you guys to check out, as well as a social media page to keep you guys up to date and let you know when every podcast is out there available. So if you haven't hit subscribe, please do that. We certainly appreciate it here within the Podcast Network, as that helps us continue to grow and expand and bring you guys quality content on pretty much a daily basis here from GSMC. So diving in now to segment number 3. What are we talking about? The latest news, rumors, notes, everything else across Major League Baseball before we wrap up with segment number 4 and my predictions for the American League East. So let's dive into it now. What are we hearing out there on the internet? Well, Jackie Bradley Jr., what does his market look like? Because it was rumored that the Mets were the number one contender for his services, but since they just signed Albert Almora, doesn't look like he will be taking his talents to Queens anytime soon. So it looks like 3 teams remain here the top targets, and that is the Houston Astros, the San Francisco Giants, and the Boston Red Sox. Still interested in bringing back JBJ. So where do I think he ends up? I think Houston is an outside projection of where he could be. They brought back Michael Brantley but lost Reddick as well as others in the outfield. So I think JBJ could be a nice solid signing for them. Pair him with Brantley, allow him to show some of the kids what could happen here as they move forward. So I think Houston, keep an eye out on them in the Jackie Bradley Jr. sweepstakes. And speaking of the Houston Astros, they avoided arbitration with Carlos Correa. They came to an agreement here of $11.7 million for the 2021 season. Houston originally went in at 9.75. Correa countered at 12.5, so they were able to meet a bit more in the middle, although certainly leaning the direction of Carlos Correa in regards to where they were able to meet. And people are saying that this could be a nice indicator that they are willing to come together on a long-term extension. Chandler Rome of the Houston Chronicle said that both parties have discussed a contract that would keep Correa with the club beyond 2021. Of course, last year was Correa's first fully healthy season since 2016. He really struggled a bit offensively, but then turned it on in the playoffs and even the ALCS, which he had 6 homers and 17 RBIs across 13 playoff games. So really turned it on when he needed to. He did miss a total of 192 games from 2017 to 2019. He's only hit the 150-game threshold once in the 5 full seasons that he has played. Now, he did play 58 out of 60 games, so call it 2 for 6 in regards to playing a full season, but former number 1 overall draft pick of the Astros back in 2012. He was an AL All-Star and won a World Series in 2017. So it'll be fascinating to see where the market is for Correa, whether or not Houston would like to get his contract in before the Mets negotiate with Francisco Lindor and potentially reset the market with that contract. So I think Houston here could be active over the next couple of weeks, both in signing their own guys to extensions as well as being active with free agents on the market as they see an opportunity to win the American League West present itself with the way the other teams have added pieces this offseason. I think that, that division's up for grabs. I previewed it on last episode. If you guys didn't hear it, go ahead and click that one. I'll give you where my thoughts are in regards to the Astros, Angels, Rangers, Mariners, A's, everybody out west. So I think Houston is a move or two away from solidifying themselves as the team to beat in the American League West. Continuing around here with rumors, Shin-Soo Choo is actually drawing interest as a potential first baseman from National League teams. There's rumors that the Brewers are one of a handful of teams interested. Choo is 38 years old. He was a designated hitter last year for the Texas Rangers. He hit .236 with 5 home runs and 15 RBIs over the course of 33 games. But the past 3 years over full seasons, he averaged .263 with 22 home runs. He's never played first base in the National Leagues, or excuse me, in the major leagues, not even the National League. Even during his time in the American League, he was either at DH or the outfield. So it will be fascinating to see if the Brewers do add him, put him at first base. He could be some depth behind Keston Hiura, next to Colton Wong, and ultimately it would be a transition for him, but I think he would be okay there at first base if a National League team were to show some interest and sign him in that location. Next, we have the San Francisco Giants, who are reportedly interested in adding Jake Odorizzi, but they are not the only team that is interested in Odorizzi, as well as the Phillies and Cardinals have been shed to show interest. The Giants have already added Alex Wood and DeScalafani to the rotation with Gausman out there, so they're looking for depth with Odorizzi, who battled injuries in 2020, only making 4 starts, but in 2019 was very good for Minnesota. He's got a career ERA of 3.92, which, if you remember, isn't far off from the career ERA of Trevor Bauer at 3.90 over the course of 9 seasons. So he hasn't put together a run like Bauer has. But again, stability and consistency is big thing there. So Odorizzi, I think, is one of the next names to go on the starters list, as well as James Paxton. Taijuan Walker is out there and available. So like I mentioned, I think that next tier of starters is starting to gain traction now that Bauer has signed and teams know, hey, this is what I have left to spend. Let's start to go after these tier 2 type of starters here. The Brewers, we're hearing their name a lot here, but they are still in the mix for Justin Turner. I think this is one of the repercussions of signing Trevor Bauer out in L.A. I think the Justin Turner era is over for the Dodgers, and that may limit what he gets on the open market. So, of course, the Brewers added Wong, but that doesn't take them out of the running for Justin Turner, and they could add him to a piece there at third base. So, he hit .302 with 116 home runs for his career during his career in L.A., so I think he still has a few years left. There are rumors that the Blue Jays could be involved with Turner, but I take the Dodgers out of the mix, and I think the Brewers are now the team to beat for Justin Turner, which, again, he said he wants to play for a contender, and I don't know if Milwaukee is that team. So does a mystery team come out, maybe give him a 1-year deal as opposed to 2 or 3 that Milwaukee would be looking to offer him? I'm not sure. And I think, honestly, Turner may have to go where his only option is there in Milwaukee and just suffer the fact that he may not be competing for a World Series like he wanted to when the offseason began. Next on the rumor mill, we have Tampa Bay. The Rays are very interested in lefty Rich Hill. There's a couple of different teams out there. Again, the Brewers, the Mets, now that they missed out on Trevor Bauer, could look at Hill. Hill's 40 years old, but has been very good over the last 5 years. I mean, he's been with the A's, Dodgers, and Twins, but over that time, he's had a combined ERA of 3.01, and even last year with Minnesota had an ERA of 3.03. So from the left side at 40 years old, he doesn't seem to be slowing down very much and may have another 1 or 2 good years in him. But the Rays brought back Chris Archer. Now they may look to bring back Rich Hill after they traded Blake Snell and Charlie Morton earlier this offseason. So they could look to fill those veterans with some other veterans. And Rich Hill, not a bad option down there in Tampa Bay. They don't like starters going long in games. So as a 40-year-old looking at that 5-inning mark with Blake Snell going, yeah, I could give them that. We could be successful. I could basically fill in for him. And it could be a nice transition there. So the Phillies and Cardinals have been reported to be in on pretty much every starting pitching. We talked about them with Odorizzi. There's also Paxton, Walker, other notable free agents, Cole Hamels, Homer Bailey, Anibal Sanchez, still available out there. Jake Arrieta is on the market. Now in Philadelphia, we want absolutely nothing to do with Jake Arrieta, but there are rumors that the New York Mets are now interested after Arrieta threw a bullpen here recently. Now, he's not going to get anywhere close to the $25 million a year he got from the Phillies, but do I think he has a handful of starts left in him? Could he be a number 4 or number 5 starter somewhere? Yeah, I think he may have a few good outings left. So if he's willing to take, I don't know, $3, $5, $7 million, I don't see why this would be a difficult option for him to find a home here on the open market. So again, still 5 to 7 quality starters still available out there, and a lot of teams looking for starting pitching. I think this could be a flurry of moves coming up here recently. Next on the list, we got a reliever from Japan, one of the elite relievers over there in that league. Hirokazu Samamura has traveled to the United States to negotiate with major league teams. The 32-year-old posted a 3.05 ERA over the course of 41 innings last year. Over his career, which is 9 seasons, he owns a 2.77 ERA with a 1.18 whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitched, which is another area where relievers try to stay under 1.3 in regards to feedback from organizations and performing well. So he has traveled to the U.S. It doesn't say any teams that are specifically in on him. But again, a lot of teams looking for relief help, a lot of teams looking for bullpen help. I think he's going to find a home here sooner than later if he wants to. Now, of course, he's found success over in Japan. Masahiro Tanaka returning to Japan. There was another gentleman who didn't sign earlier this offseason. So It'll be basically about the money and if they're willing to make things happen here. Marwin Gonzalez, the utility man from Minnesota who had himself a down year. He is gaining interest from a couple of different teams. The Mets have shown interest. The Phillies have shown interest. The Red Sox have shown interest. There's a couple of other guys for the Phillies looking to add to their bench. They're rumored for Sin-Shu Chu being a potential pinch hitter late in games. They could bring back Brad Miller, who was on the team last year, but Gonzalez has made a ton of appearances at first, second, third, short, left field, right field. He's basically played every position. So teams looking to add to their bench could potentially be willing to add Gonzalez on a shorter-term deal. Next on the list, we have the Rockies. They are not looking to trade Trevor Story just yet, as well as the Indians have come out and said they're not looking to trade Jose Ramirez. Both of those guys had been rumored to potentially be available out there since those teams have begun salary dumps and are looking to transition kind of into the next phase of their organization. But right now, both teams seem content to hang on to those superstars until ultimately they figure out how the first couple of months go. And I think those guys could be available at the trade deadline for a nice price. Now, Story would be a rental as he's hitting the market. Ramirez has obviously been very good. He was arguably the MVP last year, so his price would be higher than Story's. But if teams are on the cusp and need a third baseman, I think Ramirez could be had for the right price there in Cleveland. So that wraps it up for the rumors in regards to what's taking place here over the next couple of days. I wanted to wrap up here the last couple of minutes and just put a bow on why the players declined the recent proposal from the owners. I spoke to a couple of players to kind of get more of an update on, hey, what's going on? Why didn't you guys like that proposal? And they basically stated that it didn't have anything to do with the designated hitter, the expanded postseason, the number of games being played, because, again, they were going to be compensated for a full 162. But really, the one sticking point they had and the reason why nobody was going to approve it was because there was language in the contract that essentially gave Bobby Manfred, Commissioner Manfred, the ability to pull the plug on the season at any point. It allowed him, similar to last year, to say, hey, due to the health and safety of the players, we're going to shut down the season, and at which case the players would not be compensated. And a lot of players had discussions around the fact that, hypothetically speaking, if you think the Yankees have themselves an outbreak, or if you think the Dodgers have themselves an outbreak, just using, two very popular teams that make the league a lot of money and are very good ball clubs, if they can't play for 2-3 weeks at a time because 90% of the team has COVID, Manfred's going to shut it down. Players called them blue blood programs. Think about other teams, top teams, and they're saying, you don't think Manfred's going to shut this down if the Yankees can't play for a month? Or if the Dodgers have to shut things down for 3 weeks like we've seen, Michigan basketball had to shut down for now 3 weeks due to the new variant of COVID being available out there. So all the players are going, listen, if Tampa does it or the Marlins get it like last year, yeah, they're not going to shut down the league. But if the Yankees or Dodgers can't play for 2 to 3 weeks, they're going to pause everybody, and we're not going to get paid for those games. So it was basically that one clause that gave Manfred ultimate power to shut down the league at any point that the players were like, nope, I don't care what you're offering, what else there is. We are not giving this guy the power to be able to do this here once again and cost us money moving forward. So just wanted to bring that up for you guys who are going, well, why wouldn't you play 154 and get paid for 162? Or why wouldn't you push back spring training a month? And there's a lot of details involved, but basically the big one was we are not giving Manfred the power to be able to pull the plug on the season because we believe he would if certain circumstances presented themselves here moving forward. So that'll do it for segment number 3 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Appreciate you guys listening as always. We'll step aside here one last time for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, it's preview and prediction time. Only one segment here today, but we're going to talk about the American League East. To wrap up the American League side of things, I'll let you guys know where I think everybody's going to finish. And honestly, I think it may be a good one here in the AL East. So stick around, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Thanks again for listening, and welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Hopefully you guys enjoyed a safe and happy Super Bowl Sunday out there. I know today, Monday the 8th, should certainly be a national holiday. I mean, I say it every year. This year may be slightly different with the pandemic, not huge parties, gatherings going on, but still, a big game here, a lot of adult beverages being consumed, pizza, wings, all that good stuff. So if you're up and at it bright and early here Monday, kudos to you, because I know myself like to sleep in, even take a half day here, day after the Super Bowl, certainly to regain my composure, so to speak. But recording this during the afternoon on Sunday, trying to get it in before the big game. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady going at it. Should be a good one once again here. So thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully you're off to a great start this week. But our fourth and final segment here today, I figured now would be a great time to continue our preview and predictions heading into 2021. On last episode here on Thursday, we talked about the American League West and the American League Central. So today we're going to continue our trek around the AL and talk about the American League East. And honestly, there are some headlines taking place here. There are a few different options I was looking at in regards to predicting the standings here moving forward. And the first one was relatively easy for me. However, I have the Baltimore Orioles finishing in 5th place in this division. Now, they did surprise some people when it came to the 2020 season. They were very competitive. They played extremely hard. They came into Philadelphia, whooped up on the Phillies, and honestly, it was nice to see the effort, the way they played the game. So I do like the organization, the culture, everything that's currently taking place there in Baltimore. But I just look at the talent on this roster, and it really doesn't compare to the rest of the teams in the division. I mean, they just moved Alex Cobb from the starting rotation. Jonathan Shoup will no longer be back. Santander is potentially to be had here in trade talks. He's been rumored to be available. So I see them at the bottom of the list. The rotation of Means, Kramer, Atkin, Zimmerman, Bauman leave a lot to be desired here in the starting five. The bullpen is, it's okay. You got Harvey, Scott, Tate, Fry, Valdez, but none of those are household names in which you're really thinking a guy's going to go there and lock things down from the pitching side of things. So I do think this pitching staff going against the offenses in this division is where Baltimore is going to struggle. I mean, I think they're going to be able to score some runs. You, of course, have Davis at first base. You have Mountcastle rotating between first, left field. Mancini, if he returns from his cancer diagnosis and is able to play once again, he could bring some offense. At second base, Sanchez, Urias, Santander, like I mentioned, still there in the outfield. So I do think they could score some runs in Baltimore, make some games competitive, and that's the way, last year they were able to win a couple of games you didn't think they were. Had some good at-bats, some good offensive outings, but again, just that rotation of Means, Kramer, Atkin kind of at the top of the list, I don't think is going to be able to perform the way the rest of these teams do here in this division. So ultimately, I have the Orioles in last place. They continue to shed payroll. They continue to develop, look to the future when it comes to their window of competition. So Baltimore in that 5 spot was a pretty easy pencil in there for myself. And at number 4, I think this one is relatively straightforward as well, and that's the Boston Red Sox. I know they hired Chaim Bloom from the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a Philadelphia guy. A lot of people locally here wanted him involved with the Phillies, so I do like him at the helm now, the direction he will be taking the ball club. He's made a couple of moves this offseason, but just kind of looking at the roster and the way it stands here as of early February, I don't have them in the top 3 in regards to, where they could finish. So I think them in Baltimore down the bottom. You do have a rotation of Eovaldi. If he can bounce back, Chris Sale coming off an injury, potentially available later in the year. But the likes of Connor Siebold and Nick Pivetta could be getting innings for this squad, both formerly of the Phillies. Pivetta really struggled during his time in the bigs. Siebold was a AA, AAA guy who was involved in trades for bullpen pieces last year. So both of those guys have something to prove. And then you have Eduardo Rodriguez potentially coming back off of his COVID diagnosis. He had some heart issues last year with COVID, so that made him miss the entirety of the season there. So this rotation has quite a few question marks. You have Hawk, Mazza, both available potentially if Pivetta and Siebold don't pan out. And then you look at the bullpen for these guys. You got Barnes, Valdez, Brazier, Hernandez, Bryce, Taylor. Again, not big-time names and shutdown guys coming out of the bullpen. So for you Red Sox fans, I know you've had success in the past, but I do think this is going to be one of those rebuilds that lasts longer than one summer. They're still trying to get out of some of these contracts. The Chris Sale deal doesn't look excellent since he's been on the injured list a couple of times now since he signed that extension. You have J.D. Martinez still there as the designated hitter, but he could potentially opt out here in the near future or look to rework his contract, but I do like him. Out in the outfield, Andrew Benintendi has been rumored to be available via trade. There were talks of the Phillies involved earlier, so it's kind of a wait and see to find out if he will still be on the roster come opening day or they will move him. They have Verdugo out in center field, of course, who they got from L.A. in the Mookie Betts trade, who's a solid player. You got Renfroe in right, Devers at third, Bogarts at short. Very good shortstop there as well. So they do have a few pieces. Vasquez behind the dish offensively. And I don't think they're going to be kind of that bottom tier that, Baltimore or the Rangers and the likes of some of those other teams in the American League Central. I don't think they're going to be that bad when it comes to performance. I don't foresee a 60-102 style of record. But again, going against the likes of the Yankees, Blue Jays, and Rays at the top of this division, I just don't anticipate them being able to really compete and be up for any sort of playoff positioning. So rebuilds continue in Baltimore as well as Boston. But these next 3 teams are the ones that I believe could be in playoff consideration for the 2021 season. Now, in regards to finishing second or third in this division, I did go back and forth here. And the 2 teams in question that I have are the Blue Jays and the Rays. And honestly, this is kind of one of my bold predictions. I think the Blue Jays are going to outlast the Rays and put the Rays as a third-place finish. Them moving on from Blake Snell, moving on from Charlie Morton, I think this rotation is going to take a step back. And again, going against the offenses in this division, I think the rotation could be the most important piece in order to, perform and finish, first or second. So Glasnow still around, Yarborough, they got Waka, Fleming, Honeywell, but, neither of those guys are Blake Snell or Charlie Morton, who were 2 of the most important cogs in the rotation, especially when it came to the playoffs and making the World Series last year. So I think this is going to hurt them considerably. Now, again, maybe not because they like to use the opener down in Tampa. Blake Snell only went 5 innings anyway. So if they add Rich Hill, potentially, that could change things in regards to second or third. But I just don't like this rotation on paper compared to some of the other ones in the division. Now, relief pitchers, again, their bullpen is stacked. They have a lot of guys coming back. Castillo, Anderson, Fairbanks, Thompson, being those top 4 guys who were very good last year. Of course, everybody remembers Castillo and Anderson dominating during the regular season and then transitioning into the postseason. When it comes to offensively with these guys, they still have Lowe, Arozarena out there in left field. Rookie of the Year candidate. He still has his rookie eligibility, even after being ALCS MVP and almost World Series MVP for the Rays. You got Kiermaier out in center, solid player. Meadows, Margot in right field rotating. Adames at shortstop. Wendell at third. Choi at first base. Zunino behind the dish. So offensively, this club is still very good. A lot of solid at-bats, but Arozarena certainly lit the world on fire in the postseason. I'm not sure he's going to be able to continue that torrid pace over 162. And if the bullpen is as good as they were last year, maybe they're able to offset some of those deficiencies within the rotation. But, ultimately, I don't think Glasnow, Yarborough, and Waka are going to be as good as Snell, Glassboro, and Charlie Morton were last year for the Rays. And I think the Blue Jays are going to continue to develop and are going to be able to jump them for second place in this division. Looking at the Blue Jays rotation, you got Ryu, Stripling, Robbie Ray, Pearson, Roark, Thornton. I like those guys. I like the top end of that talent. Ryu had another fantastic season. I think he is very consistent, should be solid. Robbie Ray could potentially bounce back for him. I know he struggled here recently, but I'm higher on his ability to return to form. Pearson got his feet wet at the major league level last year. I think that's really going to help him be able to feel more confident in his game this year and be able to improve performance. And then Stripling and Roark, filling in the 4 and 5 spots in that rotation, I think is where, that's really going to help them. Now, relievers, not as good as Tampa Bay. Romano, Dolis, Cole, Brewicki, Hatch, those guys, they're not on the level of Tampa, but I also don't think it's going to be one of those units that costs them games or the reason why they're not able to make the postseason or win games coming into next year. And one of the main reasons I like Toronto is I like their offense. I really do. I mean, adding George Springer this offseason to center, you have Hernandez in the outfield, Gurriel, Grichuk still on the squad there, so they go 4 deep in the outfield. They're able to rotate guys, keep guys healthy, keep guys off their feet. In the infield, everybody knows you got Guerrero, Bichette, Biggio, and 3 out of the 4 spots, all younger kids, all should continue to improve and develop. Over at third base is really their only weakness on the infield side of things. Shaw and Espinal can continue to perform over there. You got Jansen behind the dish. DH of Tellez, Kirk, Guerrero, depending on where they put him in the lineup. So it really comes down to the fact that I like Toronto's offense. Guerrero, Biggio, Bichette, Springer, Gurriel Jr., Hernandez. I mean, this team goes 5, 6, 7 deep before you find yourself getting an easy out anywhere. And the offense, compared with that starting pitching, top of Ryu, Ray, Stripling, Pearson, I think is going to push them over the Rays and into that second place spot here in the American League East. But, of course, it's no surprise to anybody listening out there who the number 1 team is, who everybody has at the top of the American League East, and that's the New York Yankees once again. I mean, from a starting rotation, you got Cole, Montgomery, Garcia, King, Severino, if he comes back healthy, I think could be a big jolt to this team, even if it's not at the start of the year. If they find him halfway through the year being healthy and able to contribute, that'll be a big, almost trade deadline addition for the Yankees. And then in the bullpen, you got Chapman, you got Brittman, you got Green, Holder, Sesa. They're very, very solid out there, particularly Britton and Chapman in that 8th and 9th inning role. But, I mean, Garrett Cole going every 5th day. I think he's going to bounce back, potentially have a Cy Young type of year after last year transitioning to the Yankees, living in New York, trying to find his footing. He wasn't bad, but he certainly wasn't to the level he was in Houston. And I think he will return to that particular type of void. And then on the offensive side of things, everybody knows Stanton in the DH spot, Urshela at third, Torres at short. You got a DJ LeMahieu coming back at second, Luke Voigt at first. They brought back Sanchez behind the dish. And then you go to the outfield spot. Maybe, out in center, you still have Hicks. You got Judge out in right. Could be Brett Gardner in left. If not, Tauchman, Frazier, they could fill those in. But that offense is going to be lights out again. I mean, Voit, Stanton, Judge, Hicks, Torres, those guys in the middle, or Urshela, if Sanchez can figure it out. And then again, that rotation of Cole, Montgomery, Severino, Garcia, with Chapman and Britton on the back end. You know, it's no surprise to people listening out there that I have them at the top of this list here. So to recap here, the American League East, I have number 1, Yankees. Number 2, I have the Blue Jays, just outlasting the Rays for that 2-3 race. But those two teams you could probably interchange, and you wouldn't find a huge argument from myself. And then down at the bottom, we have the Red Sox and Orioles, kind of bringing up the bottom tier here of the American League East. So let me know what you guys think of the predictions. Do you guys still have the Rays finishing second since they were the World Series representative last year, or are the losses of Snell and Morton too much to overcome for them? So let me know in the comments, but that really does it for today's episode. I appreciate you guys listening in once again. It was a great episode today. We talked about Trevor Bauer going to the Dodgers, spurning the Mets, kind of getting that 2-year deal for $85 million. I think he takes the opt-out after the second year. That certainly makes them the team to beat in the West. Them and the Padres are having a bit of an arms race here to see who ultimately is going to be the team to beat. Next, we talked about the signings, Marcell Ozuna, Jock Peterson, Colton Wong, a handful of others. Alex Colomb signed. Kept you guys up to date with all the latest rumors, news, and notes. And then, of course, wrapping up with the prediction of the American League East. So I'll ask you one last time here before we sign off. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you guys are listening. Google Play, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Check us out on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, both the podcast network as well as the baseball podcast. That goes a long way for helping us continue to spread the word, continue to grow, and bring you guys great content here. But that does it for today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl. You guys are off to a great start here on Monday for the new work week. But again, that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys again on Thursday. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, thanks for listening, everyone.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.